Now in this lesson we're going to style our table. So I'm going to open Table Styled and Table Styled End so you can see what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go back over to my design. And I can see I have a table where my caption is styled, my headers are styled, I've got a background color, and I have an alternating row. So it makes my information stand out a little bit more. I also have my copyright footer styled at the bottom of my page. So that's my end that I'm looking at. Let's take a look at our styled. It's partially styled, so I'm going to open up my CSS panel, and it looks like I've managed to move mine around a little bit. So I'm going to come back up to Designer and choose Designer and reset Designer. There we go, so I can actually see all my files the way that I would like them. So this table is only partially styled, and we're going to go ahead and finish styling this particular table. So I have so far my body just to define the font and the general color for the page. I have styled my caption already, so it is a font size of 1.3M and it's bold, and I have a little bit of padding on the bottom so it isn't that close to the table underneath it. And I happen to just kind of like the fact that it was uppercase instead of a mixed case. So for our styling, that's our table itself. So if I see in my tag inspector that I have an actual ID for this table. Now remember what we said about ID versus class styles. So we are assuming that this is going to be the only table of this style on the page. If we'd used a class style, we could have put multiple pages of that particular style on the page. Now I have to admit I used an ID strictly so that it would be the only one on the page. Remember, we only use tables for data, and we don't lay out our page with them any longer, but they are very useful for data. So the last thing that we have styled over here is our TR, so our table row, and our TH, which is our table head. So that I have a background color here, it has a font color of white, it has a font size, and it has a little bit of padding on the bottom and on the top. Now we're going to style the cells themselves. So I'm just going to put my cursor in here so that I can see in my tag inspector where I'm at, that I'm in my TD. And I'm going to click on my new CSS rule. And I don't really necessarily need my T body tag at the moment. I'm just going to style my table row and my table data. So it'll be all of my table rows and my table data. And I will click OK because I really want my footer involved in that also. So I'm going to choose my font size of 1.2M. I'd like a little bit of border around all of my table data. So I'm going to go to my border and I'm going to choose solid. And it's just going to be 1 pixel. And I have a color that I would like to put in here. And since I know the color and I'm going to type it in, I want to put that pound sign in first. So it's going to be 98B F21. And if I come back over here, I see that actual color. I'd also like to make sure that everything is in the center, so I will just use center for my text align and click OK. So now I have a little bit more room in all of my cells. Oh, I actually don't. So let's put a little bit of padding in there. So for instance, I could either do that right here in my CSS panel, or I could double click this right here, and I'll just do that. And go to my box category and uncheck my padding. I'd like a little bit on top, so I will do a top and a bottom of 3. And just in case for the side, I'm going to go ahead and give that just a little bit of padding as well. That's a little bit too much, so let's make that 3 as well. Since I'm making it all 3, I can just click the same for all and click apply. Right, now I have a little bit more space. So we have every other row has a class style applied to it. So if I take a look at my code for just a second here, I see that my table row has a class style of alt. So when I go back to my design here, I just make sure that my cursor is sitting in a table row that has that alt to it, and I click my new CSS rule, and I'm going to get rid of my T body there, and I'm just going to put TR in here for my table row, and I'm getting rid of that extra space because I don't really need it because it is applied to that table row. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to change my font color to black just so that it looks a little bit different than the dark gray. And I'm going to change my background color for these because everything else is really styled. And I'm just going to give that a little bit lighter of that green color. So it's going to be EAF 2D3. And if I click apply, then I can see that those table rows are now styled differently. So I'll click OK. And the last thing that we need to do is our footer. So I will scroll down a little bit and I'll put my cursor in that footer area, and I will add a new CSS rule. And I'm just going to keep that T foot in there because it is specifically for that, and I'm going to click OK. I want my font size to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to use a 9.9M, so we get a little bit smaller font. If I click apply, I actually see that take place. I'd like it to be the same color as my header, so I'm going to make my font white, and I'm going to go to my background and give it that same darker green color. So a pound, and it's A7C942. And I click apply, and now I see that take place. So now, instead of just a boring table that's on the page, I have an accessible table that is also styled with CSS.